Hi folks, in today's video I'll be reviewing the Dungeon Notes and Dungeon Sticky Notes from 1985 games. The folks over at 1985 were kind enough to send us over these copies to review, so we're going to start off with the Player Journal and make our way through. So the Player Journal has this kind of nice sleeve on the outside. You take it off, boom, and you have 3 identical journals in here. So I think this is kind of nice as a player journal. I do like the sleeve on it. It's something that I could see keeping it if you want to kind of keep these stored on your shelf and it will keep them together. It's not really going to keep these together like in a bag or anything unless you put like a rubber band around it. Overall, I was really impressed with the quality of these. There's a good heavy cardstock on the exterior, and the interior pages are also a good quality paper that I think that is going to hold up well to a wide variety of pens and pencils, so you're not going to have to worry about stuff bleeding through, or if you do need to erase stuff, that you're going to wear a hole in the paper very quickly. And if you decide not to keep all 3 for yourself, this could be something that you buy and then share the other 2 copies with a couple of other players. Overall, I like that all of these journals do have a table of contents at the beginning, and it is partially filled in, so the things that are kind of pre-created have the page numbers marked, and then there are a bunch of blank spots, so you can write in kind of your own table of contents for the notes section, which is a great idea to be able to more easily find, oh, we did this in session 3. My session 3 notes are on page 4 through 5. Or you could even write it in like the location or something like that. However it's going to work for you, you can kind of fill in that table of context. So it's giving you a little bit of structure, but a lot of flexibility, so you can make it work for however you find notes kind of work best. So these journals do start out with basically everything that you're going to find on the character sheet, as well as a few additional things. The first page is dedicated to the stats of your character. This page actually had the section that I think I have the biggest critique on. It felt like there was a lot of just empty space on this page, so I would have liked to see the space for some of those basic stats maybe a little bit bigger on the boxes, as well as the skills, because they are aligned to the right. I personally found it a little bit harder to quickly glance down there because I can't just run my eye down the first letter of each of the skills. They are in alphabetical order, so easy to find, and then I do like that it notes what the core stat is. Some of the cool extra things that are listed in here are like a space to write in a couple of family members. I also like that there's a homebrew or multi-classing tracking page. So that's a nice additional thing that you aren't going to have to convert like a notes page for. There are 2 pages for you to fill in your spells. Now, this isn't a ton of space, so you probably aren't going to be if you have a lot of spells, you probably aren't going to be able to write out all of the details for the spells, but you could at least list, I think, all or most of your spells in here and maybe write out the short description of what the spell does, and then maybe need to refer to spell cards or the book for all of the specifics on how the spell works. That's a kind of a common thing I've found with a lot of these journals, just because if you aren't playing a spellcaster, you kind of don't want to waste a whole lot of space for somebody who's not going to use those spell pages. And with being a spellcaster, depending on what kind of spellcaster you are, you may need a ton of room because you have access to all of the cleric spells, or you might be like a warlock where you only have a few spells that you can cast. So I think it's kind of a nice medium where there's enough space without it being a lot of kind of wasted space if you aren't going to use it. I really like that there's a lot of space for notes in this journal. There are 46 pages for notes, so that's going to give you quite a bit of space to keep session notes. And it also doesn't really kind of like break the notes down into like, here's the notes for session 1 and session 2. It's just listed as session notes. So you can kind of use it how you need to if you want to have each session on its own page, or just kind of keep continual notes. Whatever is going to work best for you. This is going to be a little bit more flexible than some of the other journals that I've reviewed, as well as I think the spacing of the lines is good. You aren't going to have super cramped writing to fit in info, but they are close enough that you can fit a decent amount of writing in on each page. All right, now on to the Dungeon Master notebooks. And again, you get 3 in this pack, but this time you get actually 2 different kinds of notes. So you get a campaign journal as well as 2 session journals. The 2 session journals are completely identical to each other. I do like that the artwork is different on the campaign notes versus the session notes, so that's going to make it easy to tell them apart if you are bringing these with you and want to quickly grab your session notes, or, oh, I need to go back and refer to something about the world building, I know which notebook to grab. Starting off with the campaign notes, this starts with some kind of pre-set up pages. So you have an area for the world map, you have a spot for the Pantheon, a timeline. I thought that was a good thing to include. Then you have factions. The next page is conflicts. This is a really cool page that I might kind of steal some ideas from, of just not only can it be like conflicts within factions, but also maybe conflicts between NPCs that might come up or have some kind of effect on the world. Then you have important locations, important NPCs, and then artifacts. And then there are a bunch of lined pages for you to just write in world notes. So that gives you that nice flexibility that you can make it whatever you need it to be. And then finally, it ends with several pages for maps. And I like that there are actually kind of 2 different kinds of map pages in here. There are just some dot grid pages, so you can draw your own maps, as well as there are a number of pre-drawn maps that have some of the buildings labeled, and these are like town maps. And that's nice because if you aren't great at creating town maps, you don't have to create them from scratch, as well as it gives you a good variety. There's some smaller towns as well as some decent sized towns. It doesn't really get up to like a big sprawling metropolis, but gives you a few different options for location sizes. All right, now onto the session notes. This actually starts out with a page for out of context quotes. At some point in every campaign, there are just silly things that end up getting said. The player journals did have this page in it. It was at the very end of the notebook. So I like that this is it's at the beginning of the game master and at the end of the player, because that's an easy thing to flip to in the middle of session when you're like, I want to remember what crazy thing that my player just said or the game master just said, and jot it down. There is a player reference sheet. This is great because it gives you kind of the broad things that you need to have for all of the characters, especially when you're like planning a session and you want to set DCs for like perception checks, or make sure you're picking monsters that aren't going to just like one shot wipe out the entire party. And then the rest of the notebook, there are space for 8 sessions in each of these notebooks. So in total you have 16, and the rest of it is just kind of a repeat of the same set of pages 8 times. So on the first spread, you have a spot for 3 different creatures or monsters. There's also a spot to write encounter notes. I can see this being really useful to either write some very like broad encounter things, as well as spot to track initiative, or use that spot to track things during the encounter. So tracking things like, oh, somebody has a concentration spell up. How long is it going? Are there any environmental effects or conditions that you as a game master need to be just kind of remembering? It's easy to have that kind of open and available on the table. Next is a session bullet points. This is an interesting space that I could see it kind of at least 2 ways of using it. Either using this to bullet point out what the session is going to be. So kind of, here's the order or process of the session, or things that my players could do during the session, or use this kind of during the session to keep track of what has happened, the kind of big picture player choices or how things ended up working, and just kind of really quickly reference it out. So it's not going to be a spot to take detailed notes, but give you that nice big picture. And then if you do want to take a little bit more detailed notes, there are 2 pages for session notes and then a page for session maps. And again, it's that nice kind of dot grid. So you could do 1 big map or potentially do like 2 or 3 smaller maps on here. Now, these do feel like notebooks that if you like to take super detailed, well thought out, write out all of your descriptions, have pretty much everything written out that you're going to say, you're not going to have enough space in these notebooks for that. But if you like to kind of write a little bit more of the big picture, or just, I have everything written down big picture wise in like a document on my computer, and then I want something that I can jot down quick notes for, or kind of make those bullet points or broader picture notes as a reference, then I think that these notebooks are going to be useful for you. A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean. If you want to support our channel, you can head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. All right, let's get back to the review. All right, now on to the thing that I'm super excited about, which are the dungeon sticky notes. This is kind of the thing that I was most excited about because I had not seen these before. Maybe there are some other companies that make some of these. I hadn't stumbled across them, and they seemed like such a cool idea. So we got sent 3 different packs of these. First one I'm going to talk about are these spell slot sticky notes. And this is just a spot that you can keep track of your spell slots. You know, how many you have, how many you've used. There's a section for notes. So I could see that being useful if you have like a long-lasting effect. You can write down maybe what players you cast the spell on, or details about the effect. There's also a spot for a date, which I suppose is nice to keep track of, like what session or day, either real-world date or in-game date, these spell slots are for. One thing to note with the player journals, there isn't a spot to keep track of daily spell slots. That's one downside to the player journal. You kind of either need these or some other way of keeping track of the spells. There's the spell slot table that tells you how many you get per day, but not a place to track them per day. But I really like these, and all of these packs, they come in packs of 5, and there are 100 notes, sticky notes, per pack. So for the spell slots and then the HP tracker, which I'll talk about in a second, you get a lot. So this is something, again, I could see getting kind of split between the table very easily, where like, yeah, I'm probably not going to need 500 spell slot tracking sticky notes in one campaign. Or maybe I will, if you have a really long campaign. The second pack that we're discussing today are the HP tracker. Again, there's not a spot in the player journal to keep track of current hit points or death saves. There's a like HP box, but I kind of saw that as that's your max HP, not necessarily current. But yeah, this gives you a spot, plenty of space to keep track of your current. So if you're the type of person that you like to kind of do the math on your character sheet, you've got a little bit of space to do that there rather than erasing or all of that if you just cross it out and write the new number down below. You've got your death saves, and then I also like that there's a spot for hit dice spent, so you can keep track of that. Again, it's got the date, so you can keep track of when it's from, and because all of these are sticky notes, it makes it easy to peel off from the block and stick it into your session notes or stick it to your character sheet, and it's not going to fall out like if you end a session in the middle of combat, or you end a session and it's like, you know, you haven't had a chance for a long or short rest. You aren't going to worry about these falling out between sessions, because they're sticky. They're going to stay. And then the final pack is a variety pack. So this pack I actually saw as being kind of useful both for game masters and players. It's got location, faction, NPC, inventory, and quest, and all of these give you kind of just enough space to write some very broad notes on it. Gives you a few things like prompts of what to write. And I think these could actually be really nice that the game master kind of has most of them, and you're able to like hand out, especially like the quest and maybe inventory ones, as things that once your players get given a quest, you can hand them the sticky note, and then the players or the player who keeps all of the notes can just plop it right into their notebook and not have to worry about it, or have to worry about like, oh, I need to copy over all of the info. All right, so there are the dungeon notebooks and dungeon sticky notes from 1985 games. If you've checked out any of these journals, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because we make videos here every week all about tabletop RPGs and our other geeky interests. And I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Drive safe.
Yep, I will.
Hilo, go with Dad. Or just be quiet. You just have to be quiet then.